fresh news breaking about the upcoming September set, Zendikar Rising. The hype train has officially left the station and is bound for one of Magic's most popular planes. But after a lukewarm response from the fans during our last trip there, what exciting new mechanics and story will be explored, and what aspects of Zendikar's past will make their triumphant return? Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic flavour, design, and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
And this week we will be talking about Zendikar Rising. This week we had Mark Rosewater do his San Diego Comic-Con panel, which he usually uses to announce the fourth quarter September sets. And he did this time, but obviously because of COVID, he wasn't doing it at San Diego Comic-Con because that didn't exist this year. It was doing like an online thing, right? They were doing all the panels online, and he did a video from his living room, which was pretty cool to kind of see him in his environment. And he released some stuff about Zendikar Rising. He didn't release any cards or any hard facts, like hard mechanics or hard returning characters, really.
No statements, more illusions, as he's known.
Yeah,
for.
illusions, because his Hasbro overlords obviously want to keep their profit margins up, and speculation breeds profit margins. But he did release enough. And we, on the show, often like to do speculation episodes. Nathan, you're a big Zendikar fan, so you are pretty excited about this set, I know.
I am.
I like talking shit about Magic flavour and speculating what's coming over the horizon. So it seemed like a perfect marriage of all of our likes and loves.
Well, if you don't mind me interjecting something I love even more, can
Go
I
on.
quickly show off? Because this is something I wanted to... every now and again, I come across a card that makes me literally throw my laptop across the room. And I forgot for last week, but for this week I had to remember. And it's a lovely card from Alliances called Omen of Fire. Now, for 3 red, it's an instant. It returns all islands to their owner's hands, and each player sacrifices a plains or white permanent for each white permanent he or she controls. What
Yuck.
the fuck? Right? I mean, I thought the Boil was bad enough. Yeah, if anyone's ever played... The reason I like it is because it's got Varchild on it, General Varchild. So if you're making a General Varchild deck, you probably know about this card already and you cackle away whenever you shuffle it up. But holy shit, what were they thinking?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, a lot of older cards are just really horrible when it comes to land
but that's
destruction and things like
2/3 of the fucking colour pie. That's absurd.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that's Nathan's what the fuck card for the week. I might have another one next week, but that's a pinnacle. I haven't come across a card that horrible in a long time. That was fun.
That's pretty disgusting. I
That's
must admit, if
filthy.
that's the kind of card. So when it comes to playing EDH, right? Because this is the big sort of like salty format. No one gets salty in any other format because it's all 1-on-1 and it's all kind of it's kind of fair game. If anyone played that card against me in an EDH game, or really anything similar, anything where it's like get rid of all this color of permanent, I think I would scoop. You know. I really think I would, even if it wasn't necessarily me.
No, exactly. You're just like, no, I'm not playing with you. you go away. Imagine being like an Azurius player. Yeah, being an Azurius player, you don't even have all of the... You read the first line, you're like, oh, okay, so it's just the islands. You get back to the bottom bit with the white bits. You're like, oh, fuck off. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's insane. Yeah, right, fantastic. Right, so...
I'm kind of happy. I'm kind of happy that people don't really play those kinds of cards in EDH.
I know,
this is the thing
and
now.
they're not really known about...
When Magic Fests get kicked up back up again, or Command Fests, and we're going to be there, people are just going to seek us out now and be like, "Oh, do you want to? I've got my,
my choke.deck."
yeah. And now it's just like it's all these cards. Oh, I've got my Varchild deck. Oh, all right, yeah, cool, fantastic.
Yeah, well, Jake said everyone, I'm not going to play any basics apart from wastes, so they can't do anything about those. It's fine. I'll just play nothing but colourless decks just to counteract the meta that might befall me. But yeah, anyway, so beyond hate, let's move to things that are a bit more lovely. We love speculating, don't we?
Yeah, so yeah, we did an episode recently on Ravnica, right? And Ravnica we're not going to see for... I mean, no, it's not. I was about to say we're not going to see it for a few years. We'll see it next year, probably. But we're not going to go back there anytime soon. Whereas we know we're going back to Zendikar.
Yes.
And Zendikar is a fan favourite plane. As I said, you really love Zendikar. I know it's one of the ones that's always up there with Ravnica and Innistrad for people's kind of like favourite plane to go back to. I'll be honest, I've said this before, it's not a shock. Zendikar has never really gelled with me. It's never really grabbed my attention and my imagination. That's not to say I dislike it. If Zendikar was the only plane of Magic, right? Say how it used to be like Dominaria was the only plane of Magic for a long time. If Zendikar was that world, I would still be playing Magic and I'd still be really invested. I'd still love it. but because there are other planes, I think, I think what it is that I was talking to someone on Twitter about this, and the way that I described it to them is that my favorite planes, if we're looking at places like Innistrad, Ixalan, and I can't quite remember what the other one was that I said, but they're all quite low to the ground, right? Like, they're all quite small. So Innistrad isn't like this huge, expansive world with like endless possibilities. It has quite defined rules, right?
Well, it specifically has a misty bit at the outside. So we don't even know if it's a globe, do we, Innistrad? Because it has like some misty edge to it.
Yeah, exactly. And like somewhere like Ixalan, for example, it had very defined rules to what the rules were of that plane. And, you know, you had your Ixalan, and we knew there was things like Torozon elsewhere, but, you know, they were very defined sort of things, which is, they're kind of in a box, right? Whereas things like Zendikar and Dominaria, for example, they're so wild and expansive, and they've got so much going on and like endless possibility, which is great for some people, and that's actually what they prefer. But I think just for me, it just means that there's so much that I can't latch onto any one little thing, you know. Having said that,
fair.
The new stuff that they have been talking about for Zendikar Rising, both in Mark Rosewater's reveal for San Diego Comic-Con, which is what we're going to be talking about today, and just other kind of like promo arts and things that we've kind of seen on like the key art and stuff, I think it's going to grab me in. I think I'm going to like this set, and I think I'm going to change my mind on Zendikar.
I think a lot of that will come down to the fact that the first time we saw it, it didn't feel like, it wasn't warplane, you know, it wasn't like, there wasn't this great horrendous battle going on. It was actually nice and slow, and you could integrate into this adventure plane, this idea of going and actually genuinely going on like a little adventure and exploring this plane itself. Like, I mean, yeah, you did have massive, huge continents, but it didn't feel quite so massive because it was a little bit more intimate. It felt like the little things you were doing, like traps and quests and stuff like that, it felt like you were actually investing into the plane. Whereas once you got to Battle of Zendikar, you didn't really get to enjoy the plane. You just had to kind of choose a side and deal with the fight that was happening. So I can kind of understand how the nuance of it didn't grab you, because there wasn't really any nuance when we went back. And I think that's a big point of what Rosewater wants, and I think in general wants to do with when they go back to Zendikar, is they want to recapture that essence, that initial love, and the initial charisma that it had, which they literally bleached from the plane last time they were there.
I think the thing that he keeps calling it, the way he keeps describing it, is adventure plane, right? So several times during his panel. And also, by the way, if you haven't seen his panel, not only are there many, many write-ups online, but there's also the YouTube video of his panel for San Diego Comic-Con is now up. It's about 5 days old at this point. So do go watch that if you want to watch that, and then come back to this episode, or we're going to be going through everything that he's talking about anyway, so don't worry too much about that. But he keeps referring to it as they want to go back to adventure plane. That's the thing that he really wants to do. And that Zendikar kind of was sort of semi-inspired by like RPGs and Dungeons and Dragons and this kind of thing, where it is a realm of endless possibility and everything does keep shifting and changing because you go there to kind of explore your limits and to go on these big grand adventures. But we'll get to all this. So yeah, you've written a little outline here. I say little, you went in quite deep because you know what you're talking about when it comes to Zendikar. You really do. And we've gone through each point that he made in his video. We're going to talk about what we can discern from that, what speculations, what we have. And also, I will just say up front here at the top of the episode, we're going to be talking about things that are quote unquote rumors about Zendikar. These are things that aren't our speculation, but rather things that we've seen online through things like Twitter or Reddit or other kind of sources where magic information gets coalesced. And we'll describe those as rumors because nothing has been hard leaked. And also, we're not really interested in hard leaks because they kind of take the fun out of the speculation. But if we refer to something as being a rumor, that means that there has been larger than usual chat that something is going to be a certain way. A lot of the time, these sources are bogus. A lot of the time, these things, I'd say most of the time, these things actually don't come to fruition. So we're not spoiling this for anyone. But if you'd rather just have a complete blank slate, even away from our own speculation, probably not the episode for you. But if you do want to dive in and just kind of know, okay, maybe we're basing some of our things off. Well, you know, I don't want to ruin anything for anyone, and I don't want our speculations to put something in someoist head where they would look back and go, oh, well, I wish I didn't think about that. But if you do want to listen to some speculation, if you do want to have some kind of really soft mist-like rumors floating around, then we're going to be going through it all today.
And some of them really inform some decisions as to why we think certain things. But like, again, there's no cold hard facts here, but some of the rumors do help inform decisions that were being made, and it also helps us kind of think like, oh well, if that is true, then what does it mean for this character, or what does it might be mean for the set in general. So it almost informs our speculation rather than undermines it, and that's a key thing to take away from this.
Yeah. I will say again, like, I mean, we had a chat about literally just before we started recording about like rumors and leaks and kind of what the differences are, and I can tell you, like Nathan and everyone listening, I personally really have zero time for hard leaks. Whenever you see like a photo of someone opening up a booster pack, I think it happened recently with Double Masters, where someone opened up a booster pack they managed to get hold of and leaked a bunch of cards online, and it ruined a bunch of people's spoilers. Like other content creators had spoilers, and it ruined all theirs, and it ruined a bunch of speculation. So I'm really not into that. So if you're worried that I'm about to go, oh well, on this page at this time, here's what this person said, like if that is true, then even I don't know that. So yeah, you're in good hands.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. Let's just get cracking then. So the first thing that Mario spoke about, going back to Zendikar, was
lands. He went on about lands for I think like the first 3 minutes of when he started actually getting into the Zendikar itself. I think as we've said, we said this before we started recording as well. Like the idea that this idea of coming back to Zendikar and reliving all of the notes that it had before. I think lands is the most important thing. And as he said in his Comic-Con, Lanzapalooza was the original name for Zendikar, and it'd be a shame if we didn't go back and have a similar fashion.
It was the original like design name. It wasn't actually going to be called Magic the Gathering Lanzapalooza.
Yeah, that would be amazing. But yeah. So, but the fact that obviously we've seen landfall twice now, and the thing I think that's interesting about this is that obviously we're going to have to see some aspect of Zendikar coming back. You know, nature reclaiming things, nature coming back again. The thing about landfall is it is a very basic action. If whenever a land comes in, do something. So are we going to see something beyond the initial caveat and spectrum of abilities we've already seen trigger off of this, or are we going to be able to see it used in slightly different ways? I would assume obviously it's going to be slightly different ways, but how those are going to be used is actually a big question mark. I still think the word landfall, I still think the mechanic landfall is going to be in the set. So I think they might even do reprints. It would be a nice way to see Zendikar returning back to what it was before by literally seeing cards that were from the original set, and it stops them basically functionally reprinting things. But otherwise, I mean, beyond like the typical as it comes into play thing, I can't think of any other mechanical ways that they can kind of flex the mechanic itself around. So it's going to be more
it's interesting. Yeah, it's the payoffs, isn't it? Because I was thinking about landfall, because I play a Karametra God of Harvests deck, right? And obviously she brings lands into play whenever you cast creatures, and the payoff for that, a lot of the cards, I think I've got about 9 or 10 landfall cards in the deck, because whenever lands come in, the payoff's there. And I was also thinking about landfall last night, and it's one of those things where I think you're right. I don't think they're going to change what landfall is. Landfall will still be whenever a land enters the battlefield, it does X. But they can kind of play with the power levels of what that means for things. So you have your cards like Rampaging Baloths or Emiria Angel or Zendikar Royal, which are permanents that have a landfall ability that makes like tokens. So it made like Baloth tokens and birds and elementals and all this kind of thing. But then at the other end of the spectrum, you had landfall on something like Emiria Shepherd, which brought stuff back from the graveyard. So I just think it will be things like what kind of power level they pump into landfall, how easy is it going to be for certain formats to put lands onto the battlefield, and whether they have the Mythic do something that's completely broken or they keep everything quite low to the ground. So, yeah, I think that's where they'll play around with it. Honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing more of the same. But,
well, yeah, exactly. Big ones like Lotus Cobra, for example, like it's already like you can't beat mana production like that. But I wouldn't mind seeing something like whenever a land enters the battlefield, untap this permanent, and it does something. I
untap a land. I want another Lotus Cobra. Yeah, I think that'd be very cool.
You know what I mean? Like something like that, or something that I could even see that they might even have some Hedrons that are like inert that have reactions to the lands when the lands affect the Hedron. I would, because one of the things we've seen in some of the artworks and stuff is the fact there will be nature and Hedrons interacting with each other. It's just what are the Hedrons now, and how are they? Do they still have any residual magic or anything like that? And then how is the land going to reclaim those? I wouldn't mind seeing some aspect of interaction that way. But yeah, I mean, obviously, like clearly, this is going to be not a reinvention. Bollocks. What's what I'm looking for? Restoration. Good God! I've even got this written somewhere on this page. I just couldn't find it. Yeah, so this is going to be a restoration of Zendikar's lands, and so I think we're going to see some interesting things as well as some back to basics. I think hopefully they'll do a little mix of both. Otherwise, it'll get too contrived, or it'll be far too simple.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think Landfall's a fairly slam dunk one. I don't think there's too much speculation.
It's obvious. Like, there's no way they cannot do Zendikar and not do Landfall. It's just also going to be a matter of what lands they put in the set will really matter to how Landfall works as well. Because if it's just a basic land and you're just triggering +1/+1 counter or something, that's one thing. If you've got lands that also do something when they come in, you can combine Landfall effects from the lands themselves and also the triggers that you've got on your permanents to do some like nice stuff there. So I could see them doing something like that, considering that they had a load of lands in the original Zendikar, like Soaring Sea Cliff that gave a creature flying for a turn, and Sajiri Step that gave something protection for a turn. I could see them using that effect a lot more as well. Like lots of things that like the lands themselves do things, you know.
I agree.
Speaking of which, there was a mention of Marrow, some two words that gets everyone's hearts fluttering: dual lands.
Dual lands, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the
number,
fetches.
though.
They're not putting in
no,
fetches.
It's not. No, thank God. I mean, it means that it's not just predictably the same. It doesn't just make every Zendikar set search for fetches. Because I know they said there is going to be a product coming forwards that will have fetches in them. But it does also give them freedom to not just have the whole thing be based around. Also, you then also can't mess around with the cards in standard. Like you have to be careful about mountain and forest written on anything. And they make more interesting non-basic forests and non-basic islands and stuff, especially with Eldraine. I feel like fetch lands would be a mistake to be in standard. Not only for shuffling purposes. I just think that it makes them not be able to make more interesting lands, you know, because it just breaks them too easily.
Yeah.
Plus triomes, right? We've got triomes and fetch lands in the same format. No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. So well, we know. Yeah, that's not speculation. We know there's not going to be any fetch lands, so don't need to talk about them too much. But yeah, they are putting in dual lands, so there will be lands which will. I mean, by dual lands, I assume that they mean lands which have land types written on them, right? Like forest, plains, swamp, islands, mountain.
Yeah, usually lands that serve a function of two different basics at once in whatever function they do that in. The interesting thing about it is he said he's got 6 into the set rather than the regular 5 or 10 that cycles would normally run by. Now, I guess you could speculate that might be some aspects of they might be doing like a multicolored thing with Zendikar, of where some maybe 6 covers colors, like if it's like a taps for, if not it's like a tri-land or whatever, like, you know, it has a means of like tapping eventually like for 4 mana or something like that. Beyond that, I can't understand why they'd be doing 6 unless one of them is a dual land for colorless, and that would round off the 5+1, you know. Because in my mind, that's I just kind of think, well, maybe.
Works. But I mean, so the last time we went to Zendikar, the storyline followed that the Eldrazi were destroying the plane and that they were bleaching all the mana from the plane. And this actually opened up a new land type to be brought into the game, which were the wastes, which were the colorless producing lands. And this was something that they really wanted to put in. It was very flavorful, the set, but people didn't really like it mechanically. So I kind of think they want to steer away from Battle for Zendikar block, and they want to go back to original Zendikar block with the kind of feel and the flavor of this set. And although I mean, that would be the most likely answer, right? They have a cycle of 5 dual lands, and then they have a colorless dual land, whatever that looks like. But then that's kind of going back to Battle for Zendikar. And I thought they wanted to steer away from it. It's tough.
I feel like
what is it?
What
could it be?
I feel like they have to at least have some reference to the Eldrazi, because we'll get to that in a second. And there is a statement of whether or not they are or aren't going to be in the set. But I mean, I do think that you at least, they can't have got rid of all of the waste across the entirety of Zendikar. So I feel like they've got to at least give a nod to it, to be like, look, this is actually still present in the plane. And it's the only place in the entirety of the multiverse that we know that this basic land, this, you know, quote unquote 6th color of mana can kind of work. So I feel like if they didn't do it, then it'd be strange. The fact they've got 6 instead of 5 makes me feel like it's the only way that could work. And I also think they might still have remnants of Eldrazi, like not technology or whatever, but, you know, things that interact with colorless mana specifically. I think that's probably where...
So that's something we need to get kind of clear as well, I think, with my speculation. This is a bit of speculation that's going to inform everything else. As much as they're not going to have Eldrazi, I think they stated they're not going to have any Eldrazi cards in there. They still have to have something of the Eldrazi on the plane thematically, because there's no way that someone can design a set after a plane's been destroyed and not acknowledge what destroyed it. I think that if they did that, a lot of people would be fairly happy and on board if they just almost retconned as if it didn't happen.
Legit retcon, it didn't happen, forget about it.
Or they can go, oh yeah, well, you know, Zendikar grew back super quick, it doesn't matter anymore. And I think
exactly.
I think people wouldn't care, but I also think that's not what they're going to do, because that's a bit sort of irresponsible. Exactly. So we're saying maybe colorless. I mean, that makes sense for the numbers. You have a fairly interesting idea as to how they're actually going to function, because this is the thing we're not quite sure, right?
So this is one of these rumors that was thrown around quite quite a while ago. I think the first time I saw it was quite a while ago. But this is an idea that there is a mechanic they'll be introducing in this set of where they allow you to play cards. So basically, double face cards might be back in circulation. And the way they're going to do it is that you can play cards either for their normal card, or you can play them face down, basically as a double face card as a land. The reason why I bring this up for the dual lands is because the only way I can think of that makes sense without it being something that's got a massive caveat to it. I can imagine it being that it taps for, say, it's a mountain and a forest, and it comes into play tapped, but then you can play it face down as a colourless land instead if you were really suffering for mana that particular turn. This is the way that I can understand dual lands to work, or it could be one thing that you play it face down one way or face up the other way. It's a mountain on the front, on the top face, and a forest on the bottom face. Now this is super interesting because beyond the transform cards, we haven't, or Zoetic Cavern as well. Well, for those that know Planar Chase very well, we don't really get double face lands because lands inherently are already pretty generic by themselves, but also having a modal card between like a creature and a land is actually like really secretly powerful. Like Awaken cards back in the Return to Zendikar did this idea.
But these are going to be rares, right? There's no way they're not going to be rares.
Oh fuck yeah, God no way.
So they can do powerful things. They can do powerful stuff.
Yeah, so we need to be careful that the naming convention doesn't, and this is again why Fetch Lands I think would be out, because if you do have a mountain, there's a mountain one side or a forest on the other side, and you get to choose one or the other, but you have to choose one or the other, that is a really powerful card in your hand. Obviously, once it's in play, it's just a mountain or a forest, but in your hand, that is super fucking strong. That's why I think I can imagine this working. And the reason I put this up is because one of the big things now that Magic's becoming more of an esport, one of the huge things that they'll be trying to do is mitigate non-games. And the way that these usually work is by having Mana Flood, Mana Screw, those are the only two really, I guess. Or, or Colour Screw.
Just non-games, because they don't have non-games in other card games, right? They don't have non-games and things like Hearthstone, so yeah.
Precisely, and they're trying to bring everything back and keeping this. Again, if you're doing an esports platform, you don't want there to be, people sitting around doing fuck all. And this is the only way I can think it can work. I think to have this idea of a dual land that can function as one or the other in your hand, but once it's in play, it's set. I think it's a good way to get quote-unquote dual lands that you can fetch also from your library in older formats, but you again have to make the decision as they come in. Is it going to be a forest? I think the more I talk about it, the more it makes sense to me. So if it's something else, I'm going to be really interested. The other thing it could be because we've already seen the man lands of both sides, I don't think it's going to be something like that, but it could be something that has, like, say, an activated ability, kind of like what we saw in Innistrads, because we haven't seen those in a while either. Lands that have really strong alternate activated abilities that do something. So yeah, beyond that, I think that idea of that dual facing side, I think that works with dual lands. Plus, they would be dual lands because it's like that dual-sided dual land, dual. I don't know. Whatever.
Sure. Cool. All right, moving on then. So his next thing that he spoke about was popular themes not found on Zendikar, but they are going to be utilized better in Zendikar. So they're going to have a new mechanic, or not a new mechanic, but a new mechanic to Zendikar that has been found elsewhere, but they're going to Zendikar it up, is what he said. So you've written down a couple of things which you've been sort of thinking about. I mean, the thing that I first thought about was double face cards. So this works for the dual land theory, because that wasn't my theory. You put that out there, and I kind of think double face cards is something that they want to bring back, because every time they do it, people lose their shit. They did obviously double face cards and things like Innistrad, which really worked for things like the werewolves and all this kind of stuff. They brought it back for Shadows over Innistrad with the meld mechanic, and people weren't huge on the meld mechanic, but I think people were kind of interested to see where the design space went. And then they also had the double flip cards in Ixalan, the double face cards in Ixalan with the lands, which fits into your theory about having the dual lands as well. And I think, my two were double face cards or level up. The level up mechanic, because this is something that the last time we saw this was in Modern Horizons with the Hex Drinker snake, right? But they also it was original Zendikar. Oh, it was original Zendikar that had level up. Oh, so no, forget that then. So forget that then. So I forget. If that wasn't in Rise of Eldrazi, it would have been fine.
Well, we'll talk about that in a second, because I think level up's something to talk about regardless. But there weren't actually that many that I could even think of that would work. The one that I've deleted off of my list that I actually think, and it's funny that you say it's, what's the first words that he said about the plane? What is it? It's a what plane?
Adventure plane.
Yeah. Now, it was popular, so I don't think necessarily they would do it so quickly again. But also, if this is the adventuring plane and they don't do adventures, that's got to be wrong, right?
So you think they're going to bring back the adventure mechanic?
Maybe, but that's something. It's only because you kept saying adventuring at the beginning of the episode. I'm like, now I'm double, because I ignored it. I was like, it's literally just been out, and it's only because I thought he used the words better utilized in Zendikar. What he said was he's going to Zendikar it up. Because the only reason I didn't think so is because it was utilized very bloody well in Eldraine. It held no punches. It was fantastic.
I also think because of the time frame that they design stuff, I think Eldraine would have been designed almost at the same time that Zendikar Rising was designed, or very soon after, because there's only been one main set in between, which is Ikoria. So I think by the time that they knew the adventure mechanic worked and people liked it, Zendikar Rising was already in the can and off to the printers. So that's the only reason I don't think they'll do adventure. In a Zendikar Mark IV, I think they'll do adventure. But if they do it in this one, I think that's either incredible foresight on their part, or it was a last-minute change that they made. So we'll see.
Yeah, it doesn't fit right. That's the thing the only reason I ignored it is it just didn't feel right for them to do it so quickly again afterwards. But, I guess, time will tell. Beyond that, there are only a few that really made sense to me. One of them was Explore, which I think is it could fit. The reason I say this is because I think it's if you don't just do +1/+1 counter, and you could do other ways of moving it around, like make Explore a bit more different. I can understand that, especially because it works to the theme of the plane. And then the other two that I thought about that were kind of interesting were Domain and Adamant. The reason I look at these because we had the Converge mechanic in, was it Oath of the Gatewatch or was it Battle for Zendikar? Either way, when we went back, we had
the same fucking set. Let's be very clear here. No one can tell what the difference between those sets were, okay? They were exactly the same.
Which is part of the reason why it was an issue.
Part of the reason why it didn't actually do very well, yeah.
So they had a Converge thing of where the amount of different colours of mana you paid to pay the spell had increasing cumulative effects. Domain, I could see if they have this idea again of having this double face land idea that you have more chances of getting lands into play, you're more likely to have means of capitalizing on having lots of lands in play. Domain is a really good one because it's an ability that scales depending on the number of different basic land types. Now, this will be the only set which we could have had up to 6 in because of the colorless as well. So if Waste is in this, Domain can work really well because you can go up to 6 and it can take advantage of that. And the other way around, if they're not going to go multicolor and instead thematically the denizens of Zendikar are going to be super bloody adamant about survival now, you could go the other direction of where people double down on their colors instead of diluting and diversifying.
So what you have the adamant mechanic?
Yes, exactly. Or the
you didn't actually say the adamant mechanic. You just said the word adamant in your description.
Oh, sorry. I suppose. Yeah. So obviously, one requires more mana of one type, and then one requires mana of differing types, or having lands of differing types. So I guess it kind of depends on where the land theme falls.
Adamant is an interesting one. I mean, that was Eldraine as well, though. You see.
Yeah, you see what I mean. Yeah,
this
is why I think Domain. That's why I think Domain's it, because I don't think they'd have done Converge, because I think Converge was trying to fix Domain, but I think it ended up being worse. It didn't play as well. Plus, it dilutes that mechanic a little bit more. Whereas Domain's harder, to do. It's harder to get one of each basic land type in play, and if you can get all 6, then your profits should be pretty good. Plus, it fitted into Alara, where it was a converging. The landscape was changing, and this again is an environment where the landscape is changing. So I could see them doing it interestingly with Domain. They might bring back Converge, but then the problem is that was already in Battle for Zendikar, and then it's not.
I don't think they'll do Converge.
Yeah. So I think if they were going to do that, they'd look at Domain and go, Domain's clearly the better option.
Okay, so to cap this off, then you're saying Domain. Which can you just explain to me what Domain is? What the actual Domain mechanic is?
So it will have an effect for each basic land type that you control. It will do X. So it'll do say deal 1 damage target creature for each basic land type that you control. So if you have a forest, a plains, a mountain, and blah 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 blah, it will obviously do 6 damage. Whereas if you only have just a plains and a mountain, it will only do 2.
Cool.
That idea.
All right. So Domain, and then I'm thinking double face cards, which is something that we're fairly hot on anyway for the land.
Yeah, I think the DFCs. It just depends on how they do the transformation, because obviously the mechanic. I don't think DFCs count as a mechanic, whereas I think transform counts as a mechanic. If you know what I mean.
Sure. I mean, yeah. Well, obviously they'll have to have transform on there.
Yeah.
But, okay, we'll move on then. So the other thing that we spoke about it a little bit a minute ago, is the fact that you said hard. There is going to be no Eldrazi in the set. No Eldrazi cards, and no cards that interact with Eldrazi. Cool. I'm fucking sick of Eldrazi.
That's fine.
Brilliant. I'm still sick of it.
Fine. This to me is the retcon. This is them going, we know what we fucked up with the plane, And it wasn't necessarily the Eldrazi themselves. It was just the way that the way everything ended up working out mechanically and the way the set fell. It kind of ruined them a little bit. And we don't need them. God damn it, we don't need them on our plane no more. They've done enough ruination.
I really liked Shadows over Innistrad, and I think weirdly, I'm in the minority. The more and more people I talk to about Shadows over Innistrad, the more people kind of are a bit down on it, weirdly. But I like that set, and I liked Emrakul.
That's madness.
I know. Hey, literally. I liked Emrakul in that set, and I liked the way that they did the Eldrazi, because they didn't actually do that many Eldrazi in that set, or they did like Eldrazi Wolves or Eldrazi like Clerics, whatever. Battle for Zendikar, it was just wall-to-wall fucking drones and like scions and all this kind of stuff, and it was just, as much as each individual card looked beautiful like as an artwork, and as much as things like the borders were a really nice idea, and the Titans obviously look and feel incredible and like very epic, as a set to look at, if you were to take like a big card sheet, it was just all of the grey cards versus all of the not grey cards. And
it was very
boring.
Grey. Yeah, it was very beige, wasn't it? And I think the biggest, as you hit the nail on the head, because the way that they did the set is they basically just went, here's Eldrazi, go ahead. Whereas with Shadows of Innistrad, they kind of integrate. It's like with Rise of Eldrazi, it worked because there was this Eldritch horror thing that was sitting in the back, like it sneaked up on you. And people have said for like ages that had they flipped Shadows and Battle around and had Shadows over Innistrad, and they reintroduced Eldrazi slowly through this, through secretly, and it is actually genuinely a mystery. And then the set afters, boom, there you've got your war with the Eldrazi back on Zendikar. That would have worked infinitely better as a story arc than the other way around, of where we're not only sick and tired, and we already know that they've beaten by fire, but now we've got to deal with yet another one ruining yet another favourite plane. So I guess that was why a lot of main point being, this is exactly why they've taken Eldrazi out of Zendikar, because I think they know that there's this feeling from the player base that there is a fatigue to giant monstrosities, and it kind of did ruin the plane, not only for like legitimate law reasons, but also for every other reason, mechanically and otherwise. So,
sure.
Yeah, I think
but
that's
what
good.
we put under here, underneath the no Eldrazi, is that you've stuck down weapons and armor, structures, residual magics, and utilize or scoured from memory. So I think this is a cool idea. I think we're going to see lots of visual cues to the Eldrazi, like so as you put down here, structures and weapons and armor. I think it'd be really weird if we didn't see like the vampires of Zendikar, who are quite tribalistic, or the goblins of Zendikar, which are all very craggy and kind of makeshift as goblins are across the multiverse. I think it'd be very weird if we didn't see them having like Eldrazi helmets or like swords with tentacles on them or something, something really weird like that. I think
absolutely
that's something we can expect. Also, there are the vampire faction on Zendikar are kind of interesting in regards to this, because they're the main faction that kind of fell to the Eldrazi and became subservient to them, right? So how do we see them bounce back in the eyes of the rest of the
and interestingly,
Zendikar?
None of the artwork that we've had released from the comic pan showed a vampire, so we don't actually know what the kind of how they've kind of settled down, because they were the closest influenced by the Eldrazi, and obviously you had Kalitas who turned traitor as well. So how are we going to be able to see him again? How he's been left, as a serf maybe? I mean, who knows? But yeah,
I think it'd be very interesting.
It'd be stupid not to mention them, but it's good that they're kind of making it known that they are being washed away and eroded back down again. And it's being kind of, Zendikar's now taking the Eldrazi into Zendikar rather than the Eldrazi ruining Zendikar, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I agree.
So
cool.
Yeah, so the next thing was that he said that there was going to be 2 returning Zendikar block mechanics in the set. Now, one of them is obviously landfall, so that only leaves us to have to speculate for one of them. Now I went down through basically all of the ones that that got released through first block and the second block. Things like Annihilator, Devoid, and Jest, we can ignore those because the Eldrazi aren't there, so we don't have to worry about that too much. It's when we look at the other ones that we can kind of break down and think about, like, okay, where can we, where can't we? So first one, since you've already mentioned it, Level Up.
Yeah.
I think Level Up's really interesting, but I think the problem with Level Up is it's just coming after Ikoria, where we had keyword counters and mutate. Imagine a half-leveled up creature that has a menace counter and is being mutated on top of. My brain broke a little bit just thinking about it. So the next thing we could look at is say quests and traps. Now these are key, these are signifiers of Zendikar more than any other. When we first went there, this idea of questing off to the quest for the Holy Relic, and the actual names for them sounded like stories that you went on. And this idea of trap cards. Now trap cards was super interesting, and everyone loved doing the Yu-Gi-Oh thing. If you've activated my trap card, that kind of thing. That makes for fun limited play. The problem I find with these two mechanics is, one, I don't think quest technically counts as a mechanic, even if it is on the Storm scale. scale. I don't think you can count a subset. It's like cartouches. I know it is technically a mechanic, but that's more just a subset of enchantments. The problem I find with something like traps is they kind of did all of the big abilities already, and surely all of the traps have been sprung now. You know, like before when they were adventuring into all these like these temples, and the crypts and everything. Fair enough, they're going to have booby traps, but now giant Eldrazi monstrosities have erupted out of them. I kind of find it hard to believe that that bear trap's still untriggered. So I don't necessarily feel like it works necessarily as much as it could have, even though I really like quests and traps. I think quests might show up, but they might do it as sagas or some other format that they've already been playing with since the original quest came out. But I think they can do it better. They've done a lot of work with enchantments going forward. So I could see quests being reimagined in a saga-y kind of fashion, but I don't necessarily see traps or quests coming back in full force again.
Okay.
That does unfortunately leave us with very few options as to what we could use. I don't think rebound works because we used it in Tarkir, and it's I don't think it, as much as it is to do with as much as we are going to be looking at how Zendikar recovers, it's not necessarily about the royal and the unpredictability of the plane anymore. So I don't see rebound being quite as up there. The same kind of thing with surge and converge. I don't necessarily see these spell-y kind of effects which tend to denote multiple different types of mana coming together. I don't see that necessarily being the focus. That does leave us with a couple of options, though. Now, one of them, I think, is more on theme, but unlikely. And then the other one, I think, is less on theme, but much more likely. The first one is Awaken. Now, with lands, all the lands, how many times Mary said lands, and the fact that this is a lands block, I think Awaken was a really clever mechanic. I think it worked to utilise spare lands and have your lands do more than just be mana producers really, really effectively. However, I don't know if it has the same problems as Level Up does, of where now we're mutating onto lands, which is fun, don't get me wrong, but I'm just thinking, I don't mind complicated board states, but this is standard, this is limited, these are formats that your less enfranchised players are going to be playing, and you want it to mutate already fucked a lot of things up in terms of complicated mechanics. So I feel like it's just that one extra thing they might not go to. It might be a bit too cluttered. The other thing as well is that it works so unbelievably well with Ugin's abilities that I'm not entirely sure they just go, here, have the perfect control deck set up for you, Because all you have to do is have a couple of cards with Awaken that are good control cards, and you're kind of already setting up a deck that's kind of difficult to interact with. Again, I'm not a future league. I don't know how the format's going to look and how certain decks could tackle it, but it does feel like an oversight if they went, here, have all of these an abundance of colourless creatures and a way to make them untouchable whilst also having a board wipe on a Planeswalker, So for me, that was a final nail in the coffin for Awaken. Though I'd love to see Awaken come back. I thought it was really interesting, and Noyan Dar was one of my favorite legends from that block. So as much as I'd like to see it, I think the much more likely option is multi-kicker / kicker. Main reason being that I think it's another generic kind of ability that they can do a lot of things with. We started seeing alternate kicker costs, things like tap and untap vampire and stuff like that to get the additional effect. So it doesn't just have to be pay mana and then pay some more mana to get an effect out. But I do think it works with this idea of Zendikar's magic does have this idea of having a bit more pop. It has a bit more kick to it, literally. So I could see this happening way more. Plus, it's from the original Zendikar block. It's from World Wakened and Zendikar. So it will have nostalgic connotations to myself and probably a lot of players to make them, if you open up cards in a pack of Zendikar Rising, you go, oh, that's just like the card from original Zendikar. It's already doing its job, of reinvigorating your love of the plane and keeping everything feeling like it's, collective. So realistically, I think out of all of the ones that we've seen, if Level Up, which I think was, don't get me wrong, I think Level Up's an amazing mechanic, and I think it would have done really well seeing everyone re-establish themselves, build themselves back up again from the dregs of what they've been left with. But I think, once you add in all of the other, mechanics that are sitting in the current format, I think it seems a little less likely. And in the same fashion, then I think I can draw a line through Awaken. So yeah, my money's on multi-kicker / kicker.
Cool.
Hopefully they
multi-kicker.
do both.
I don't think they'll do both because I think they want to keep things clean. I don't want them to do both. I want them to try and do new space. And if they keep packing all these sets with the same mechanics over and over again, they don't ever get to explore new space. We know we're going to have landfall. So let's do landfall, multi-kicker, try new other things. And it's just, it'll just be more interesting.
I guess at this rate, we haven't had a new mechanic, really, have we? I mean, I know he didn't say that we weren't getting a new mechanic, but obviously he didn't talk about any new mechanics that are coming in, and the current 3 that we've got are ones that are very tried and tested, and people know about them. So yeah, I think multi-kicker, considering it only had 1 set's worth of breathing room, would be really interesting. I'd like to see what they can do with that.
Cool. Moving on then. We know that we are going to have 3 planeswalkers, which he said that in the panel as if that's like some really big fucking revelation. But don't we get 3 planeswalkers in every set? I don't understand.
Right?
So this is a little aside. I know the way that he was presenting everything on the panel. He has to kind of appease the marketing departments who want him to be the face of the company. So everything he says has got to be a selling point. Do you know what I mean? Like, he could say, we've called the game Magic the Gathering. It's like, yeah, we know it's called Magic the Gathering, Mark, but he's got to present it like it's, like a selling point.
Yeah,
there's that aspect. Also, Mark Rosewater, if anyone's seen even a 30-second clip of Mark Rosewater, he's the most energetic man on the face of the planet. But I don't know how he keeps it up, because if I had his job with the workload, if I had his level of customer-facing antics, and if I had the amount of people that shout at him daily for things that aren't even his job, I don't think I'd be as energetic as he is. But he's really passionate, he's really energetic, and he was saying, we're going to have 3 new planeswalkers, we're going to have 3 planeswalkers. It's like, yes, okay, 3 planeswalkers. He did say, and this is kind of different to what we're used to of recent sets, at least, is that they're going to be 3 planeswalkers that we already know. So there's not going to be a new planeswalker, which actually, in a kind of reverse of what I usually like, where I always like new space and new stories and new characters and not just relying on the same 6 people, I'm actually kind of happy we're not getting a new planeswalker, because they haven't done any work to flesh out their new planeswalkers. And so to get yet another dude with a spark.
Plus going back to Zendikar, like, we should go back to people that we've already seen. Like, there's enough history there that we don't need to invent new characters like Calyx to make it more interesting, Like, we can keep it to the tried. Like, even then, like, the 3 that we know, there are multiple planeswalkers that we could assume would be here that aren't. So that's the thing that's good about Zendikar, is you do have such a wealth of planeswalkers you could choose from. They don't need to invent new ones.
Exactly. I have mixed feelings about the planeswalkers they've chosen. So the ones that they've chosen, the ones that we know are going to be in this set, are going to be Nissa, Jace, and Nahiri. Now, 2 of those planeswalkers, I am sick to fucking death of. I am sick to the back teeth of. Now, I don't think it's a mystery. That's Nissa and Jace. Nahiri, like, we love Nahiri. We want to see more of Nahiri. The thing, though, that I actually realised, and I noticed this on Twitter the other day, because I was talking about when I first saw this key art, the way we know that these are the planeswalkers. He didn't say this in his panel. We know this because we have now pictures of the key art that's on some of the packaging for Zendikar. And on the packaging, they have the 3 planeswalkers, right, on the different booster packs and the backboard of the booster box. And when this got revealed, I mentioned on Twitter or somewhere that I was sick of Jace. And then I actually looked on Scryfall as to when the last Jace planeswalker was actually printed, like the last new Jace planeswalker as opposed to a reprint. And it was War of the Spark, which was over a year ago.
It doesn't feel it, though, does it? It feels
actually, in terms of, like, we're
exposure,
so sick every set's this first one, it's actually been quite a while, right?
We haven't had it in a while. Yeah.
And I think the same's for Nissa as well. I think the last Nissa planeswalker we got was the one who shakes the world, which was War of the Spark. So, do you know what? Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
We didn't get any Gatewatch for a while, which was, I think, a very active decision.
Well, no, but we did, didn't we? This is. I mean, my rants are famous about fucking Liliana and Chandra.
Yeah, but after War of the Spark, we didn't, did we?
No, but they printed new Chandras and new Lilianas in the core set.
Mean. Yeah, right. Forget the.
Do you know what I mean? So, but actually, for Nissa and Jace, yeah. Like there was a core set. Do you remember? Like with all these bloody products. But yeah. So actually, fine, okay, and they do seem to be different, or at least Jace does. Jace looks very much like pirate sexy boy Jace.
He does, doesn't
he? And I say that with the greatest deference to Jace. He's not a sexual object in my eyes, but he was shirtless in a lot of Ixalan, and I think a lot of people were quite into it. So
the nipple was out for a while.
The nipple was on show, and he was rocking the pecs.
It's funny. See, I have more problems with Jace than I do with Nissa, specifically because the last we heard of him, and this is something that I'm going to say a sentence that might get you excited, but unless they retcon Forsaken, which I don't think they're going to do, unless they do that, like, he was heading off to Vryn the last we saw. Like, I don't. Again, we might see justification in the stories. I say that with a massive, massive pinch of salt, because whenever we hope for the story to explain things, it doesn't. But I think I'm more interested to see why he's there, considering we thought he was going to be somewhere else. The reason I'm also annoyed is because in terms of colour satisfaction. I know they don't always do one of every colour in the set or whatever and try and keep it as balanced as they could. But why not Kiora? Because Kiora's going back to the plane. We already knew Kiora was going to be sitting in Zendikar. Kiora's a blue walker anyway. Could have
I
satisfied...
thought Kiora was going to be in this set. I must admit.
I hadn't seen the packaging until today, and I had a load of things written out as to why I thought it was Kiora. I was going to say she can be mono blue because she's no longer searching for big monstrosities to kill the Eldrazi, so she doesn't care about the green side of her. She can just focus on the blue side. She probably has to do some restoration for... No, none of this. No, it doesn't matter. Well, bollocks to it. So, yeah, I'm interested to see why he's there. Yeah, there are two options, I think. Is one that they retconned it and they ignored it, which is entirely possible. Or there was something on Vryn that he needed to get from Zendikar. And he obviously has a lot of knowledge of Zendikar, so I mean, I don't think he's specifically going there to help Nissa.
No,
So,
I don't think any of them are linked. I think the way it's going to work is that they're all going to be doing their own thing, and they're going to just kind of bump into each other, or they're going to have one. They're going to have one planeswalker that's kind of just in the background, and I think that's going to be Jace. Yeah. I think this is going to be a Nissa and Nahiri set, because the reason that we're saying that he's back to being Pirate Boy Jace is because his outfit in the key art is much more streamlined than his robes that he usually wears. Mm-hmm. It's more of like he looks like more active and more sort of athletic. He's got more of a kind of adventurer look, which is what this plane's all about. So I think what it's going to be is it's going to be Nissa doing her saving Zendikar thing, because that is her story arc flat. That's all she's ever blooming done. We're going to have Nahiri, I think, on a bit of a redemption
when she damned it by letting the fucking Eldrazi out.
Yeah, no, but then that just kicks off the whole, I love Zendikar. I destroyed Zendikar. Now I've got to go back to Zendikar. Yawn. But that's going to be her. And then we're going to see Nahiri. I think Nahiri's going to get a bit of a redemption arc.
Yes.
If they keep her as the villain, I will be disappointed.
I'll be furious.
I think we need to have a bit of redemption for Nahiri, because she was a bit of a douchebag in Innistrad.
Yeah, we also need to hear back about what happened with this. I reckon this is our way to get the point of view as to what happened during war as well. Yeah, that's the idea of why don't you care about Sorin anymore? Why are you chilling out? And I reckon they probably had a conversation that made her go, maybe I shouldn't have wreaked destruction upon your plane. Okay, maybe I should go back and look after mine again. And then, this is her kind of finding humility again. This will be really nice. Whilst also being a badass bitch who goes around kicking ass, don't get me wrong. Zendikar's got to have its shit sorted out. But I think it's going to be, as you say, a redemption arc, this way of getting her to a point. Because no one really hates her, even though she's done horrific things. I mean, she's no Nicol Bolas, don't get me wrong, but in terms of in the last 5 years, she's done one of the most reprehensible individual problem things out of anything. And yet still people are like, that's fine. It's Nahiri.
Yeah, no, cool. I must admit, that does annoy me, because whenever I describe to people the fact that Nahiri is the antagonist of the Innistrad stories and that she is in the wrong, people, including yourself, have come to me and gone, it's not her fault that she didn't know that Sorin did that. I don't care. She summoned an Eldrazi to destroy a plane.
Yeah, no, just because it's justified.
What are you talking about?
Just because it's justified
it's
doesn't mean it's
justified,
not wrong.
Though. I don't even think it's justified.
well, of course, but you can, as long as it's, I think it's justifiable from her point of view. I don't condone it. I'm not saying it was correct. Okay. I'm just saying that I can justify why she did it. I'm not saying that she should
people
have.
do. People do try and justify it. But anyway, I think this could be a whole podcast. Exactly. I think we're going to see... Because also, isn't she still the Lithiomancer? Because,
yes.
So she's a member of the core race. The core race have a thing called Lithiomancy, for people that don't necessarily know, which is essentially crafting weapons out of stone.
Super masonry.
Yeah, super masonry, which is why we get things like Stoneforge Mystic, which was an early character thing, which her Planeswalker character was taken from, blah, blah, blah. But so they have this thing called Lithiomancy, but she is literally the Lithiomancer. She is the mythical sort of genesis for this kind of core ideology, because she's a pre-mending Planeswalker, and she's been, she's been around for thousands of years. Is she going to come back to the plane? And because people didn't really recognize the last time she was there, she kind of went a bit under the radar. Is she now going to come back and people are going to start recognizing who she is?
I think so. If she starts spurning, if she spurs this restoration effort, and obviously considering lithomancy really helps to build structures and things like that. I could see her being like a savior. One of the leading forces that helps. Not ley line wise, that's going to be Nissa side, but everything else side, the social structure, actual physical, geographical structure. I reckon this is her she can not only mess around with the hedrons and everything, but also she does need to kind of, as you say, kind of find her way back into her own plane. I feel like she doesn't feel like she lives there anymore, and now this is her way to come home and kind of make it back into her home again. Yeah, like there's no way that they can't. If they keep her being bad, I'm going to be so angry. I just
Yeah,
want
I
a
think
cool
I think
Boris
she works.
character.
Yeah, I think she works better as being not an anti-hero, but being just her own thing. I don't think she necessarily needs to be the bad guy or the good guy. She needs to be her own thing. And we'll talk a little bit about Nissa, but only because I think there was another character revealed in the key art, and you've put down an interesting thing which you think links to Nissa and this other character, which I want you to just explore for a couple of minutes. So the other character outside of the three Planeswalkers that we got told about in the Marrow panel was that there was going to be another returning character with an added color. And
shock horror, who's that going to be?
This wasn't even speculation. People were like, "Oh, Omnath," because Omnath started off monocolor, then dual color, then tricolor, and then the packaging revealed him with his 4 arms, and one of them is now white. So we're going to have a blackless Omnath.
So what do you think happened first? Do you reckon they knew they was going to add white to him because he was obviously an M20, or do you reckon that the community demand for it was so high that they basically went, I guess we have to find a way to get him white and put him into Zendikar Rising? Like,
no, I think they struck gold there. I think they did 3-color Omnath, and then people were so hyped for a character that they could have a playset of in all different colors that they were like, sweet, we're going to capitalize on this. So I think they were going to keep doing this, but I think they struck gold with their design, and people really gelled with it. But how does this relate to Nissa, Nathan? What's your theory here?
So the reason of this is, if you notice the fact that we have a red-white planeswalker, Jace being a blue planeswalker, that leaves 2 colors of mana. Now, had it been that Kiora was in the set, then we could have had a bit more green. But there has been rumor speculation of Nissa coming back and being black-green. Now, that might... See, the interesting thing about this is her initial showing was in Duel Zone 9, back in the day. The first deck you ever played with Nissa was a black-green elf deck. Now, yes, there was a lot of black-green elves in Lorwyn, and her story originally had her going to Lorwyn and becoming a bit of, a bit of a racist, because, for her, and especially going to Lorwyn as the first place, to them, elves were like the highest accolade of race, and everyone else was shunned. Now, it's funny to come all the way back round, full circle, having seen her go be monogreen forever, have a little touch of blue, and now going into black. The reason I think this is interesting is because her leyline magics might require her to delve into the black necromantic side to be able to reinvigorate and resurrect the plane. I think it might be a necessary thing for her to have to do. Having already spoken to Amonkhet's World Soul, having spoken to Innistrad's World Soul, she's had interactions with black-based planes. So I don't think it's outside of the wheelhouse for her to have to delve into that side of it. I don't think she's going evil. Let's completely disassociate this black is evil thing, because I don't think it's that. I think it's just a necessity. Plus, if Omnath has localized all of the other 4 colors of magic to himself, what else? The only other color that he hasn't really done is black, which lets Nissa use the black side. Because this is the question, is maybe story-wise, and this is when we start moving into like story speculation, is a Nissa and Omnath working together? Are they going to be working conversely against each other? Is Omnath going to be the antagonist of the plane? Is he? Because I know, basically, if you look up Omnath, his original statement is that he was the divine manifestation of Zendikar's unstable mana. Now, divine is the big word there, because he's now finally got white mana into him as well. We don't know what his consciousness, what his sentience is. We don't know if he just has emotions. We don't know if he actually has like an agenda. And this is where it's really interesting, because you can see Nissa, who is essentially, the world soul, because is so tightly connected to Ashaya and the world soul. But then Omnath is almost like the mana source of Zendikar, and I could see these 2 great forces not necessarily having the same ideology or having the same direction, and that's what's going to cause a big hoo-ha when it comes to mana and ley lines and how they're going to actually, resurrect.
Could Nissa be the antagonist of this set? I know Black's not evil. I'm not saying that she would be evil, but could she be the one that people are trying to stop? Maybe people want Omnath.
Yeah, maybe she goes too far. Being. She's been completely isolated. The last time we've seen her, Chandra basically went, yeah, but no, thanks, bye. Whether again they retcon that idea, I don't think they will. I think they're kind of stuck with it now. I think it's gone too far. So But considering that she's essentially been left in isolation to fix her home plane by herself, as much as it isn't doom and gloom and she's gone off going, well, screw you guys, I think there could be this idea of isolation, this feeling of I'm having to do this by myself, this narcissism, and this is where the black side of it can come in. This idea of this is the way to fix the plane, it's the only way to do it, and it's my way of doing it, and everyone else goes, it's not Zendikar's not just yours, you know. And obviously, if Nahiri then comes in and goes, "Bitch, I've been around for thousands of years. Who the fuck do you think you are?" That is actually a really interesting story, and I could see. I don't want to speculate too hard on the story because I just end up being disappointed it doesn't go exactly how I want it to. But I could see this struggle of power between, you know, Omnath, who's just like an actual manifestation of nature, and then Nissa, who's trying to actively have a sentient control over the ley lines, and then this pull and pull effect with Nahiri, you know, maybe having some effect or something in it. But yeah, I could see Omnath not being a good guy just because he's got white mana, and I could also see Nissa not necessarily being a bad person because she's got black mana attributed to her, but I could also see the inverse on either of those things, if not both. Both of them.
I mean, possible. As you've written down here on the outline, and I agree with you that at some point in the future we have to see a 5-color Omnath, right? So he has to be all colors at some point. So maybe I don't think this set is going to end in the destruction of Omnath either way, whether he's the antagonist, protagonist, or whether he's just kind of chilling. So maybe the storyline doesn't even revolve around him. Maybe he's just doing what he has been doing for the past few sets, and he's in the background.
I would be really annoyed if he did, because we have built him up a lot over the time, and he didn't actually have any story integrity in any of the other stories. And it is interesting when you look up on his wiki page, it does say that they had to do ritualistic visits every half year to keep him contained. And obviously, since Rise of Eldrazi, they've not, and now he's escaped. And I feel like if they didn't capitalize on that built-up potential for story, I think it would be a shame. But at the same time, if they do just put him in the background, give him more colours, give him cool abilities, I'm not going to be angry about it. You know, give me cool Omnaths. That's absolutely fine.
Cool. All right. I mean, those are the Planeswalkers. There's a lot to dive in with those because they're usually the ones that drive the story. But I just, they at this point, now that war's over, I think they can pretty much do what they like with these characters and treat them how they want to. Even Jace could go back to being something of an antagonist figure, like how he was in the very early days of his kind of character arc. But yeah, we'll see. For my money, I think Jace is going to be in the background, and we're going to see Omnath, Nissa, and Nahiri do their thing. But could be wrong.
Exactly.
Could be wrong. All right, we've not got much time left. So one thing that we are going to talk about just at the end here is that we didn't get to see any cards, but we did get to see some artwork, and presumably much of this artwork is on the cards themselves, but they didn't even put down what artists did what. I mean, artists themselves have released on Twitter the images that they did illustrate, but they're keeping things very sort of tightly wrapped. We're not going to do this as a visual episode, so there's no real point to us doing every bit of artwork and dissecting it bit by bit. There's about 7 or 8 images. There are 14.
Yeah, I have 14. Yeah, I know exactly.
All right, so there are 14 images. Some of them are landscapes, some of them are characters, whatever. The one that we're going to look at specifically, and we will break down because it's quite one of the prominent ones that people have been sharing around, so it's quite easy for you guys to find, is the Angel artwork that was released. And it was Hugh Pinder that did the artwork, is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So, tell you what, I'm just going to describe the artwork, Nathan, and then you can kind of break down what you think is important about it, and I'll either agree with you or disagree. I'll probably agree with you because you know better than I do on this one. So we have a 4-winged angel with the classic halo around the head covering the eyes, which is how they've been depicted so far. Something that's changed, though, is that this angel is in quite a high battled stance. So it's got 2 weapons, one in each hand. The weapons themselves are made of the bismuth-looking rock, which is the same rock that Kozilek used to leave behind when he destroyed things. And the spear that the angel's holding, it's holding a sword and a spear. The spear, at the head of the spear, before the blade starts, so the head of the handle, is a hedron, which is the... how do you describe? What kind of shape is a hedron? It's a tetrahedron. Basically. Tetrahedron, that's it. So it's a tetrahedron shape, which is the hedrons are the things which classically are found on Zendikar and are the things that kind of channel Zendikar's magic. This is kind of interesting. There's a lot to digest here. So what are your thoughts on this angel?
Well, first of all, the big thing is harkens back to a Mirror Angel. The actual literal card, a Mirror Angel, 3/3 fly, makes 1/1s whenever a land comes into play. One big difference between the two of them is Mirror Angel originally had 6 wings, whereas this one only has 4. I think that's just an aesthetic change. I don't think that, there's a new specific story beat that someone's gone around clipping 2 sets of wings off of everybody. But if they are, and they are deliberately harkening back to this, the difference also is things like before she had a crown, whereas now she's got her hood up to show like almost like this continued fall from grace. A nice tidbit, the halo that they wear around them, and the reason they wear it over their eyes is to basically, it's almost like shame for their failure of not being able to stop the Eldrazi the first time around. That's why they wear them down. It's also why the really, really strong ones don't tend to have them, the higher up ones, because they know about these things and they're not hiding from it. But a few things that are really interesting in this artwork is, one, there are Hedrons in the background that seem to have had all of the runes completely eradicated from them. This is the same, and you can see this in a couple of other artworks as well out of the 14, that some of the Hedrons seem to have lost all of the inscription that Ugin put into them. Whereas the one that's on her staff at the end, the one that's at the end of her spear, that still has its inscriptions in. So the magics haven't been lost from those specific Hedrons. So this idea of some Hedrons keeping their magic and some Hedrons not keeping their magic might be a very key part of the set. And exactly how, like, what's been left behind and how much of the magics is left behind. The fact that we're using bismuth and the fact they're adapting Eldrazi, I'm not going to say technology, but at least Eldrazi influence back into their regular lifestyle is really important. The fact they float as well, one big thing is that the blade is floating, similar to how Kozilek's obsidian blades used to float out from his head. So they still clearly keep an aspect of their eldritch magic. It's just a matter of how much. Another thing in the background is we've started to see all of the vines starting to reclaim back the Hedrons as well. I imagine that Nissa has done some crazy souped up juice ability thing where she's just, force palm the floor and the entire planet's like in hyperdrive. But beyond that, we can't really see anything else. I mean, there is still quite a lot to pick out because clearly they are integrating Eldrazi technology into their lifestyle. The fact there aren't any birds in the artwork as well makes me feel like it will be the same character, but it will do something completely different.
Sure. So you don't think this is a reprint with new artwork?
No, absolutely not. Otherwise, there would be birds in the artwork in my mind. Or what it will do is it will do the exact same thing, but it will make whatever these bismuth weapons are, it will make those whenever a land comes into play instead of making the 1/1 birds. Because that's the only thing.
So it could make like maybe like really basic equipment, like a 1/1 +1/+1 sword, which is the equipment cost for 1 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that, or like something that's an artifact, like say a treasure or a clue, but it does something offensive rather than drawing you a card or gaining you a mana or something. I could see something like that as well. But yeah, that's the one that kind of had the most nuance to it. Like we have a load of other like land artworks and character artworks, but it's more generic. There is like a generic hunting party just falling out of the Hedron like they was back in original Zendikar, which is great to see because it does harken back to original Zendikar artwork massively. And I think this as well, this Emiria Angel is specific to that. Is it's trying to recapitulate that feeling you had and the image and the visuals that Zendikar originally had, because that's one of the biggest things that Battle broke was how Zendikar looked. And I think they'll do as much as they can to revert that while still making story sense as possible, which is why I think obviously Nissa's a big part of this storyline, because there's no way that it would have recovered without her.
Another thing to note about some of these artworks as well, just in general, is that a lot more of the landscape artworks are literally darker. So Zendikar to me has always been a plane that's quite bright and quite light, and a lot of the areas of Zendikar are incredibly sunny or tropical, or they're usually above the clouds of the Hedrons or whatever. We seem to be seeing quite a lot of like darker regions of Zendikar in this one. There's lots of like lightning aesthetics going on between a lot of the Hedrons and stuff like that as well, which at least for the last time that we went to Zendikar wasn't really the big thing. So I think we're going to see a slightly different look to Zendikar, maybe exploring some newer regions. But yeah, I mean, you're right from a point earlier, just thinking about it. No vampires. Where are the vampires?
Yeah, exactly. Another really interesting thing is that in one of the artworks, Seagate seems to have been restored, and it is doing a sky beam of quite considerable proportions. This could also be a big key point, a part of the story, but it's hard to tell from an artwork like this because all you can do is see like, oh, that's pretty interesting, but it could just be generic fantasy Zendikar, or it could be a massive signifier. So have a little look through because there are some really interesting things. You get to see some of the Eldrazi when they've been they've been left to rot and things have grown over them and stuff like that. So yeah, really cool.
Interesting. All right. Well, I mean, that's going to do it for our speculation, guys. This one's a bit more informed than our Ravnica one. The Ravnica one we did was almost entirely fueled by our own wants, desires, and in-depth knowledge of Ravnica. Whereas this one, we've actually had a bit more grit and actually some stuff, because it's a set that's going to be soon and is definitely happening. Whereas Ravnica, Mark IV isn't actually definitely happening. It's just something we assume. So that's it for us. I'm excited. As I said at the top of the episode, I think this is going to be the Zendikar set to show me, a non-believer, why Zendikar is the best plane in Magic. Whereas I think for a lot of people, this has been evident for quite a while.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it'll be us coming back to something that we actually recognise and can enjoy, unlike last time, which was devoid of any character. Doing it.
Less Planeswalkers is better overall, is what I've discovered. And I think last time, because they had to try and do the Oath of the Gatewatch stuff with Zendikar, there were too many characters that were vying for position to tell a decent story.
Yeah, it was all about the people. It wasn't about the place. You know, we've had this argument before as well, that I think that it would be amazing to see a set that has no characters in it. I know we couldn't really do that from a story point of view, but I'd love to see a plane of where you just see the plane and you see it developing as a normal place instead of it having to be about these gallivanting space wizards that can do crazy things, you know? Which, but I think they know that and they're going to move away from that anyway.
Well, I mean, look at Ikoria, where we had 2 planeswalkers. One of them didn't planeswalk until the very end of the story itself. The other one was there, but was so fit in Vivian. She so fit into the aesthetic of Ikoria that it didn't matter that she was a planeswalker. She was just another person there. And then we had an unknown planeswalker antagonist that, again, didn't do anything too planeswalkery. Like, we don't,
Yeah, they're breaking the mold. They're trying to break the mold, which is quite nice. Like, even you think about Garruk, like, we didn't even really get that much of Garruk in Eldraine, really. Like, in terms of, like, outside of the World of Quest, like, you didn't, otherwise you wouldn't have necessarily known beyond the card going, hey, here's black and green, and then, here's a card where he loses his black part. There you go. That's Garruk back. I mean, he didn't need to be the overbearing presence, even if he was in the advert. It didn't matter that he wasn't a main part of the storyline for it to really break the story up a little bit.
Yeah,
you know?
I think narratively they're starting to reel back from the oversaturation of main characters, like marquee characters. I think they're starting to realize that their actual player base, who actually buy the cards, are not that fussed about having to have 50 different planeswalkers to collect. You know, they're happy to have 1 or 2. They don't even necessarily need to get involved in the story, and that the planes are more interesting on their own. And I think you're right. I think that's from the artworks and from the choice of planeswalkers, the fact that there's no new ones, the choice of them, of like how they might present them in the story, the kind of speculations that we've had. Yeah, we could be in for a pretty good Magic set.
Yeah, and it'd be a shame if they bugger it up for a second time in a row, wouldn't it? Imagine if they do that. They go, hey, here's an amazing plane. Let me ruin it for you twice.
If they did that, I don't think we'd ever go back. I think if this Zendikar plane doesn't sell, that's it.
Yeah, and I feel like they wouldn't have. I mean, I don't know. Is there any point of where they can go, you know what, this isn't working, cut it out? I don't think they'd have let it go ahead if they weren't really confident it was going to do good. You know?
Oh, I don't know about that.
I know that's a brave thing to say, isn't it?
I think you could say that about any set, couldn't you?
Yeah, I suppose. I guess hindsight's 2020, isn't it? So come back to me in 6 months while I'm crying in a puddle because Zendikar's ruined forever.
In 6 months' time, we'll be knee deep in Phyrexian oil, so it'll be okay.
Oh, good, right? Yeah. See, exciting things to look on the horizon.
I mean, again, that's not even a rumor, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know that. It's just, come on, we have to be going back to Phyrexian,
we've got to go back to it. Right?
We've got to go back. Okay, cool. Well, that's it for us then, guys. If you enjoyed this episode, something that we haven't asked you to do for a while, but would actually really help us out. We're starting to get a bit of traction as a podcast again. We're having like another little boost. We're reaching another little plateau of our growth. So if you liked this episode and you want to see more of this kind of stuff, or if you just like our podcast in general, share it with a friend and anyone that you think would be interested in it. Any of your local play group, if you have a play group that you play with regularly that you want to get more into the Vorthos kind of side of things, anyone that you talk to that you speculate about these things with that doesn't listen to our podcast or you don't think listens to our podcast, do share it with them, because the more like-minded people we have behind us listening to this kind of stuff, the better it all becomes. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel as well, do go check it out. It is very creatively called Magic the Flavouring. If you just type that into YouTube, you will find our channel where we're doing flavor-based Cracker Pack vids. We're doing video versions of some of our interviews and some of our podcast episodes, and we will be experimenting with different kinds of videos on there as well. Subscriptions are very much appreciated. This is a very baby platform for us. It's brand spanking new. So any subscriptions from anyone who's already subscribing to our podcast, if you head over to our YouTube channel, hit that sub button. Again, share the videos as much around as you can. That'd be a big help. If you would like to hit us up on Twitter, you can find us on Twitter at mtflavouring. My personal Twitter is at AndyManface. Nathan's, yours is?
At the Fox in the Moon.
At the Fox in the Moon. I love repeating that. I don't know. Every time you say it, I repeat it.
I was literally thinking as you said, is he going to repeat it again this episode? If
It's
you
really
ever stop,
jaunty.
I think I'd be annoying.
Exactly. It's really jaunty. I like doing it. There we go. Emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. And Nathan, any final thoughts for this episode?
No. I mean, Summer's here, so I might. Actually, I say that I know Summer's here because I spent one day out and I'm immediately red. If you don't know me very well, I'm a very pale man. I'm not allowed very much sun. But yeah, so if you are going to go out, wear some sun lotion. There we go. Good. There we go.
Wear some sun lotion. Oh, and a mask and sunglasses and all that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, all of the other things you should be wearing anyway. But yeah, also get some sun lotion.
Excellent. And all that's left for me to say, guys, as ever, is thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.